Hello, my name is Morgan Canal with Feed Your Genes. Today I'm joined by Dr. Penny Kendall-Reed from the GeneRX platform. Dr. Penny, today you're going to take us through a review of the platform, so let's get started.
Thank you so much. So what I'm going to talk about today, first of all, is a little bit about what's in the platform, and then how I actually go about uploading a patient into it, how I edit it, some key little things that I do in editing, and then how I actually present it to a patient. So first of all, let's just take a quick little peek at what a healthcare practitioner would get in the report. So as you know, there's a bunch of different sections, and each of the sections have multiple genes in it, because that's the whole idea with GeneRX, is that genetic integration. So the metabolic section, this is basically looking at our three main hormones, adiponectin, leptin, and ghrelin, from a variety of different genes, and how each individual code satiety, hunger, food cravings, the rate of fat burning, etc. Then we have our diet. We have carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. And again, looking at multiple genes, it tells us how our patient's body responds to carbohydrates, fats, and proteins in terms of weight gain and cholesterol and inflammation, and thus how much should they have per meal. Similarly, are they breaking down dairy, or are they creating inflammatory responses to it? Our metabolism of serotonin and dopamine, from our production of it, our breakdown of it, our production of receptors that it can bind into, and thus the impact it has on our body. Our short and long-term stress response in terms of how much stress hormone we make, how easily our HPA axis gets activated and turns itself off so we can return back to parasympathetic. The type of exercise that we need in terms of cardiovascular and weight training. Some types of exercise will increase weight in some individuals, and that same exercise will decrease weight in individuals. And then, of course, our inflammatory response to injury and our susceptibility to it, how well we repair our tissues. Immunity, a big area right now, particularly with COVID about. This section talks about how does our body view or find a virus and bacteria? Does it do it that really quickly and jump on a response right away? Does it linger a little bit and allow that virus to replicate? What's our inflammatory response to viruses and bacteria? Our autoimmune responses, our allergenic responses. And we have an inflammatory section, the production of our inflammatory cytokines, those really key ones that, again, sort of like the stress hormones, will trigger almost every gene. We have our phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification section, our clearing out of toxins and our production of certain toxins. Vitamins, minerals, and methylation. And finally, our metabolism of estrogen and testosterone. What's not listed here, because it's a brand new section, is the sleep section, which looks at how quickly we will transition from one stage of sleep into another, the depth of stage 4 sleep that we'll get into, how well our sleep cycles are regulated. So as a healthcare practitioner, it's a longer report. You will get all of these sections in it. As a trainer, if you just want the metabolics, carbohydrate, dietary section, and stress section, and exercise section, it's a much smaller report and a little bit more economical. So it's really what you're looking for. So let's go back to starting and how we would actually upload a patient. If you don't have a GeneRX account, you would just click on Get Started here and follow the instructions to setting up your account. If you already have an account like I do, you're going to go straight into the login button. We're going to log in with our password and our email. And then this one, I've got mine set up so it takes me right to Gene Files, which is a list of all of my patients. So I'm going to click on New Gene File, and I'm going to use myself as an example here. So you put in the patient name. Let's do this correctly. And then we want to select the text file. So when you first download a 23andMe text file, if you are downloading it yourself, you would then choose file, you would go straight into your downloads, and it would be in your list here, and then you would hit choose, whichever one. Let's suppose I was doing this one, I would hit choose, but I'm going to cancel that, because the secondary way, most often, our patients are sending us a zipped version of their text file that they have downloaded. Really important to note here, you cannot load up a zipped package. So you have to unzip it. And you do that by my text files over here on my side of my computer. If this was zipped, it would say zip on top. I would double click on it, and then it would automatically unzip it, and it'll overlap the zipped file on top of the unzipped file just ever so slightly. So you just grab the one that says TXT and you drag and drop it over here. And this is going to start to load up this text file into your program. And as soon as it's loading up this text file, you will see the save button brightens up. So now we're ready, it's done, and I can save this. And so as soon as I save it into my account, it brings me back to my gene files. If I want to go to myself, I put in my name here, and this comes up. So this is one that I've uploaded before. This is the one that is just being processed, and now has just been processed. So I can open up either of them. When you go to open and edit a file, it's really important that you click on their name and not the view, report, or download file. These are PDFs, and as you all know, we can't edit a PDF. So what we have to do is we click on the patient name and we wait for it to come up. So that if I were to hit view PDF here, again, it would give me a non-editable form. So the first thing to note is the first 10 or so pages of this report are what I print off and give to my patients. My patients don't need to know every detail about each gene. They just basically want to know what's going on in my metabolic section and what do I need to do about it. So this is the summary of each of the recommendation sections for the report. So what I do for my patients is I just print off that summary section, and it's usually the first 10 to 12 pages. As soon as you get to the end of the sleep section, recommendations for sleep, you will see report. So here begins the actual report that is more useful for the healthcare practitioner. So the metabolic section, as we know, has all the different genes in it. And we're going to go through just 2 sections so that you see what I would do with a patient. When I'm talking about this with a patient and we're going through just the top, if they want a specific on a gene, absolutely you can pull this out and you can say, MC4R is a gene which controls hunger and satiety, and it does that by regulating leptin versus ghrelin production. So for this gene, the normal allele is T, the variant is C. I'm TT, thank goodness. So I'm normal for this gene. These are all characteristics of the variant allele. So these are characteristics that I don't possess because I'm TT. If I was CT, I would. If I was CC, I absolutely would. So then it goes into adiponectin, which is the production of the hormone, or adipocue, the production of adiponectin, which controls fatty acid oxidation, blood sugar levels, etc. For this, and this is during weight loss. For this one, again, I am normal. These are characteristics of the variant. However, the second adipocue gene is making the production of adiponectin during weight maintenance or if I cheat. Here I'm heterozygote. So this is the patient that tends to gain a little bit more weight when they deviate from their diet, that yo-yo dieter, and that's certainly me. ADRB2, this is how stress impacts the gene. PPAR gene, this is thermogenesis, the rate of fat burning as well as inflammation. And FTO, one of our biggest metabolic genes that controls leptin, adiponectin, and ghrelin, and adipogenesis, the formation of fat from food. And here I am variant, so I have all of those characteristics. When I'm talking with a patient, I literally say it that quickly. I say, PPAR gamma deals with thermogenesis, which is a fat burning process and the production of inflammation, both inside blood vessels and inside fat. That's it. And you will get that summary at the top. So here is the recommendation section for me, putting all of that information together. If I wanted to edit this, so I would hit edit custom recommendation. So let's say these were the genes of a patient who, let's say, was anorexic. And so despite the genes above, they were actually underweight because of a variety of, let's call it, serotonin and dopamine and stress issues. And so I didn't want them to take tri-metabolic control. I could go in here and I can delete any of that I want. Or I can say, you know what, I don't want this patient to intermittent fast. So I could do that. You can highlight a section. You could say, there's a different product that I wanted to use. I wanted to use, let's say, resveratrol. You could go in and say 1 capsule twice a day empty stomach to help with thermogenesis there, I'll even go in, and what I'll do is I do this, I put the company name in, and then I save the report. I'm not going to save this one here because it's my, well, actually it doesn't really matter, but I'm going to backtrack on mine so I can keep this for me. So once you've done those changes, you hit save. Any changes that you make here, automatically, it changes the summary up top. So if I had kept those changes in here, you would have seen the changes would have been made there. And then I go into my next section. You don't have to scroll up and down each time. I just go through the report. So now I'm in my carbohydrate section. So I see the 3 different genes. I get my recommendations section. So for here, I know for me, despite the fact that I code very poorly with carbohydrates, I've always known that because I've gained a lot more weight with carbohydrates. So I eat very few of them anyways. So the metabolic extra for me, 1 capsule 30 minutes before meals. I put this in there for everybody if their patients have unstable blood sugars. Because with my coding, if I did eat the amount of carbohydrates that most North American is, I would have unstable blood sugars. So I put that in there, but I don't need it for me. I also don't have, because I also don't eat a lot of those types of carbohydrates, I don't generate inflammation in my GI tract anymore from them. I used to, but I don't need this anymore for me. So I'm definitely going to make those changes there for myself. Again, if you have a different product for a patient that you want to put in there, or even different suggestions saying more than you're sensitive to carbohydrates, or you make insulin and inflammatory substrates to them, you can change any of this verbiage, save it, and I'll show you that it is actually changed up above once we go into it. So here's our recommendation for a carbohydrate. Oh, sorry, that's it, not in the recommendation section. So you can go in and change every single section within this. You can change timing of them. You can change different products, but there's also a few key areas that I like to go in and make changes to. And those changes would be things like the vitamin and mineral section, or serotonin and dopamine. It's a really big one. I code very poorly for dopamine. So I make very little, I clear it out really quickly, and I have very less production through this gene and less receptors. So I am definitely a candidate for Focus Plus, which in the US is Dopa Plus. But I exercise every day. And it's my way that I've always controlled my dopamine. So I would definitely go in here. And if I didn't know the patient or know the patient very well, I would say, if needed, and we can suggest, this is what I would use. But I would prefer to use exercise as a mode of treatment. And then we can talk about that. And then we would look at exercise genes. And once again, I would save that category and move on. So then you go down to each section and change things accordingly. So you don't have to our patients don't want to know every single characteristic. They don't want to know that MAOA is something that has a faster breakdown of epinephrine and norepinephrine. They don't need to know, they just want to know what's going on with my serotonin. So if you just look at this, you can literally say, you make less serotonin in both the brain and the intestines. Your transportation of serotonin out of the bowel to its target tissues is also greatly compromised. Just say that, and then say, so to treat that, we're going to use this. Don't get caught up in all of the points. The more that you use the genes and learn the genes, if you want to go into these key characteristics up here, you can. But otherwise, one, it'll take you far too long to spend that time with your patient. But it's just too overwhelming for them. So go by those key variables up in the summary section and keep it really, really simple. So that's my approach of how I treat patients. You can then also start to get a little fancier when you get into it, and you can start to look at how the inflammatory section has a greater impact on the exercise section if you're doing the wrong kind of exercise as well. But the big thing to know is that you don't really need to worry yourself about doing crossover between the sections, meaning the integration of section to section versus the integration of each gene in the section. I've already done all the work of integrating all of the genes within each section. And if you treat those sections accordingly, then they will automatically start to treat the interaction between the sections. Meaning, let's say somebody's doing the wrong kind of exercise, so they're producing inflammation. So we're going to treat that section, and we're going to help them increase their metabolism while they exercise and drop their inflammatory load. Then we also take a look and we see in their inflammatory section that they're also making too many inflammatory cytokines for any stimulus. We know exercise is a stimulus. So we're going to, so is stress, so is fever, so are so many things. But if you treat that inflammatory section as well, then you've already stopped the inflammatory section augmenting the exercise section even further. So don't worry about the interaction or the crossover between all of them. Keep it simple and you'll see it's a really simple report to use.
That is wonderful, Dr. Penny. I just have a couple questions for you.
Of course.
Now, as you move forward, will there be any more SNPs that you're wanting to add to the GeneRX report?
It's a very good question. Yes, there are. So I'm working on a thyroid section and a GI section. They're almost both completed. Those will be uploaded soon.
Oh, that's so exciting. And I want to know how you explain to your patients the value of this report. For example, I usually just say, this is a one-time, spend. Instead of playing the guessing game, let's just look at the genetics. Is that similar to what you talk to your patients about?
You are absolutely right. So genetics basically gets at the root of everything. How many of us have tried a million different diets out there, a million different exercise programs? We read an article on a product and think, oh my God, that sounds fantastic. Curcumin's a great one. Everybody and their brother is taking curcumin, but you'll see in the detox sections, that can actually really increase inflammation in a lot of people, depending on how they code. So when a patient comes into me and says things like, well, should I be taking the 5,000 international units of vitamin D that everybody seems to be taking? My honest answer to them is, I can't tell you unless I know your genetics, because you might absorb vitamin D really well. You might transfer it to the receptor really well, and you might have a ton of receptors. So therefore, we actually don't need to overdose you on vitamin D. Or if somebody says, should I be doing ketogenesis? My honest answer, and it's coming from the heart, I don't know. It's wonderful for a small select few people. So is high carbohydrate, low fat for a few select people. It really depends on your genetics. So when a patient is asking me something, I literally bring it back to how the genetics will play a role in it. And that dictates my treatment for them.
Mm-hmm. Well, this has been extremely informative, and thank you, Dr. Penny, for taking the time to go through this wonderful report with us today.
Thanks for doing it with me.